Good evening, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for attending the Art History and Focus for the London Art Week. And I think you will have all known Hélène Binet, whose work is the subject of our conversation this evening. And Hélène is here with us. And I won't mention the very extensive CV and biography of Hélène, because she's such an important and renowned photographer, certainly in relation to architecture. And she has had close associations with Zaha Hadid and Daniel Libeskind and Peter Zumthor. We're going to look at some of her projects and also focus on the most recent project that she's been working with, which is on Jewish country houses across Europe. So that will be our discussion. And if I could ask you, if you've got questions, we're going to talk for about 45 minutes, and then there'll be about sort of 10, 15 minutes for questions at the end. And if you put them in the Q&A box for us I'll read them out at the end and carry on the conversation. So please do that. So perhaps we could have the first slide, if that's possible.
So thank you, Ian, and I'm really excited about this dialogue. I'm very excited because you're an artist, and I'm sure it's going to open up new discussion.
Well, I'm so looking forward to it, and I don't pretend to be an expert in the field of architecture or photography, but I'm so enthusiastic about both. And yeah, so let's begin. And on our screen at the moment we have two images. One is on the right-hand side is Daniel Libeskind's Jewish Museum. I think was it under construction at this time?
Yeah.
And the other is Zaha Hadid's Vitra fire station from the Rhine in Germany. And what's striking about both these images is just the formal expressionist language that is very much to do with their architecture, but you have, in a sense, composed these photographs to almost be taking their architectural structures and turning them back almost into sort of Russian constructivist images in a way. I mean, that's how I certainly feel with Zaha Hadid. There's a sort of play of abstraction going on. And you were saying that it comes from a filing cabinet, in fact, or
yes, I mean, I am in a fire station in Vitra, and it's the ceiling where you see the gap for the staircase, but the black part is the corner of the cabinet where the firemen put their equipment. But definitely you really went straight into some of the important matter that makes me wanted to photograph more and more. Always space it's very beautiful to create that very compact world, which is the image, the fourth segment that stop the flowing of things in the world. And by this creating a world that belongs somewhere deeply to the making, to the thinking of the architect, to the history of the building, and then we will see with the Jewish house to an early dream, and how to do that. That's what I'm trying. And can I say something in just few lines? So in the case of Daniel Libeskind, the Jewish Museum, the relationship between the line and the city, and the connection between the absence and the body that is the emptiness in the building, and a line in a point for an architecture so conceptual expressed with light, I think I get a little bit closer to its complexity. So this has been my task, and this is what I like to do. It's to touch some essence with a very silent language, which is the black and white.
And what I was thinking about these two images is that to begin with, one feels that they are close in their sort of formal language. But then with the Libeskind image, there is this incredible sense of texture. And I think this is a recurring quality in your photography, is this, the closer you get to the image, you've got this kind of fine grain of dust on the surface of the floor, and these kind of ribbed lines that the dust sort of almost articulates. It made me think of Man Ray's photographs of Duchamp's large glass, where he leaves it for a year on the studio and it just collects dust, and you become so alert to the powdery surface. And there's something really beautiful about this relation between abstraction and this kind of very tactile register you have of.
Yeah, I think in that case, there was a real take a position, because the assistant wanted to clean everything, and I said no. And it's the desire, maybe the texture there, because it's a construction site, it's not the final one, but it's the desire to give the possibility of entering the images. And often a little crack, a little things, a little texture allowed you to go in. We will see when we see the project I photograph in Korea, where they have this notion of unfinished in their work, the Mac and the Bium, where this gives you an opportunity to join. And I think in that case, it allows, to go. And then there's the zigzag, which is almost the zigzag of the building, because the building has this plan, which I didn't feel the need to do with the Zaha. In that case, for me, it's going back to her painting and really the abstraction of the painting.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, texture always very important.
Yeah, and the cigarette packet on the floor gives one a brilliant sense of scale as well, in this, and prevents things from coming too formal. And I suppose that's always that thing of it. These are real spaces as well. That there's this kind of that one's entering into. The other thing I want to talk about is this sense of black and white, and you choose very carefully when you employ black and white and when you bring work with color in photography, and it's something to sort of I want to sort of return to this question with different images, and maybe we could begin now with this next image that we have, which is the discovery of the Jewish country houses. And I wonder if I could just ask you, Hélène, to introduce this project and how you were approached to take part in it, because it's a wider study on Jewish houses that this amazing. I'm gonna make the book, plug the book, because it's so fantastic, and it's Abigail Green and Juliet Carey have edited it, and it's a really wonderful text. And you have your photographic essay within the book, so I really recommend everybody gets this, because it really is an extraordinary thing. But could you tell us a little bit about how you approached and your relationship to the project?
I mean, the book is much more standard than my photographic essay, because it touched more case study and also more condition. But the idea was to understand when it was possible for Jewish family to finally own land, build, what was the gesture that was done to be assimilated, to have a sense of belonging. So very, very different building. We have Miss Van Roo in the beginning of we are at the beginning of the 20th century, and then we have the Franchetti Villa a few hundred years before, but or even 100, I think, years before. The idea is what was the gesture that made this family to say, this is what will allow us to belong,
Mm.
because the Jewish tradition doesn't come with a big architecture tradition. It's the book, it's the thinking, it's the words that count. And it's extremely touching, and it's extremely beautiful as a photographer to read through this building, some are quite heavy castle, houses, say, what was, the idea and why before starting somebody had that desire that said, if I am going to put my root here, this is what I want to do. So it's not the architect, it is the client and the person which is going to live in that place. So in the Franchetti villa, which was a villa where the Franchetti family also hosted Montessori, that created that amazing education. So it was about the world of also helping the women from the area, the children from the area, but also helping the idea of learning. Learning was very important. So they go back to an architecture that almost reminds you a bit the Renaissance, the clarity, the thinking. In the Tugendhat, there's this desire to become completely fresh, completely new, with glass, with gardens. And I see very often behind this project a lady, a wife that it's there and is with the architect or with the place creating those projects. It was really a fantastic program, because you got to know a history of a family more than a history of a specific architect in some quite unique conditions. So, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the importance of very often the importance of women in relation to these houses, and in this particular one, which is the Villa La Montesca, the Alice Franchetti, I think is her name. And she was the one that set up the schools and was very much active within the community and sort of progressing both education and allowing the house to be in the service of the region's children. And it's a really fascinating relationship between a Jewish family that really is very much playing part in the political life, the cultural life of the community. And there is, as you said, there's this sense of, in a way, a history of precarity as a people within Europe. And each country has a different, very problematic relationship to Jewish history within their country. But this sense of how then to become established within society, whether it be through politics or good works, and really working with people, and it's really quite moving, some of the stories and behind these families and how they worked. And one of the sort of obvious differences with, in a sense, your previous practice of working with living architects is the sense that you're working with historical buildings that have been lived in, and so there's the initial. You wrote very beautifully in the book about the initial vision of the building, but also the sense of living in it and how one's relationship to the building changes as you live in it, and the importance of, in a sense, them being houses. And I wondered, my question really is how you related to the buildings, and whether you were there for a long time, and how that impacted on the way that you came up with the images you did.
I would like to emphasize more on the fact that those buildings are known.
Right.
Tugendhat House by Miss Van Roo, it's known. I have nothing on my shoulder to see I need to present this building because it's a new building, and with few images, get the sense of what it is. And then I can play with what I think matters for the subject. They have been lived in, but they are mostly all museum now. So there is a form of control that is not really the full living, but they've been there is traces of how, and you can imagine of what was the present of this winter garden in the house, and how do you relate it when you arrive into the Tugendhat house. It's extremely beautiful how you see the table and the unfolding of the spaces, and then you see the garden. Only when you turn right you have the big opening towards the valley. For me was that moment quite of an important moment, because I wanted to get the sense also that it was a place that where you feel protected, where you feel surrounded, where yes, you had the view on something very open to the city, because the family had their role in the city, they did a lot, they were quite active, but it was also a place where you could somehow feel home. And there is this sculpture. I even don't know if it's the bust of Madame Tugendhat or not, but it was a presence for me, a feminine presence. And in many of the photographs, you see this presence of the bust of the little sculpture next to the famous wall. So yes, something I play with it. Maybe the historical are right or not, but I play because it's about giving a new life. It's not the place. We're not there. We're looking at a photograph. So there's new narrative coming.
Yeah, wonderful. One of the things I forgot to mention that there is this amazing exhibition in Strawberry Hill House, which is on at the moment with your photography in it. So I sort of need to properly tell everyone that is an exhibition to go to. It's yeah, really, really brilliant. And you get to see the house in relation to your work, which is really insight. It's a brilliant thing to do. One of the things about this image, this pairing of images, and I wanted to talk about the pairing of images. I read that Abby Warburg was a friend of Alice and Leopoldo Franchetti, who's this house we're looking at now.
Oh.
And he visited the house, and I'm struck by you almost employ a Warburgian device of always bringing two images together, and he did this in his lectures to allow one image to open up another and help us to see but I wondered if you could talk about that, because we have some single images later, but very often you're pairing and what's happening.
I mean, it's only recently that I started to, even if I really know about his work, but realizing that I should put my head more into work, because there's a lot that I would probably feel very much in connection with. But very early on, let's say when I was photographing, when I photograph space, you come to a sense of feeling that photography is somewhere and architecture somewhere. The experience of architecture are so different that the image can never really be the space, but the photography has the possibility to move, and that's why architects like to have books, but also to have an exhibition, a book where you bring them together. And when you bring them together, if you have a little similarity in the composition or something, you read them together. And I think then you start to imagine, and like in a dream or when you read a book. And I think this is this most spatial experience that the photograph can give you. Sometimes when it's the same project, then you started to think, is that the same, the staircase from different point of view? In that case, it was just about talking about the role of the lady in the making of this house. Alice, now I forgot the name of Tugendhat.
Franchetti.
Franchetti. But wonderful technique to be able to stimulate something. So the image is there to open up something that is also very personal, because everybody will see something different. So I try to pair and to do my diptych or triptych a lot with the work. Yes.
And I think what it does is also invite looking. And I was really struck by your resistance in the book, and I think as a principle in general, to label your photographs or to quickly say what they are, but instead allow the images to speak for themselves. And there is this sense of when one looks at one image and then the next, it sort of allows you to ask questions of relationship that otherwise you just wouldn't see. So it is a way of privileging the visual over sort of explanation or tech. I sort of almost feel I'm talking too much, but it invites just an attention to the image, which I find very moving, and it allows for time to be taken. If we could go on to another image, if that's possible. And this is a very wonderful example of how there are these sort of associations and echoes that are in one. On the left hand wall painting, you have this sense of the foliage crossing the corner into this sort of void space, and on the right hand side you are echoing it in a way with your idea of a sort of projected shadow. And is that right, or would you say something very different about these images?
There's two things that, of course, in one part of the left image, it's really there's something undefined. There's a cloud. There's something to make you thinking, and the other one has a shadows. But in that case, there was something really, really specific that Lieberman, that's the house of Lieberman in Berlin, was a painter. And he painted he made this house to paint. That was his reason to be and to be there and to feel belonging to a long tradition of painter. And he painted the garden, and he wanted to have a very specific type of light. And he made the surface of the house all a bit with a lots of texture to have a more refracted light. So the wall become an instrument to create a paint that you see also in what he did, a little murales. So there is this relation between a light that is created by the wall and then the work he did. So there is a very specific narrative in that case. That was his desire to make light. So if you have a desire to make a garden or to make education, his desire was to make light, which is very beautiful.
Wonderful. That's great. And I love this willingness to leave the wall unpainted as well. So you have this relationship between the painting and that sort of that void that is so full in a way. It's very beautiful. Okay, so let's go on to another image, and tell us about these two images.
Okay, and just to go back to the beginning, you mentioned color, black and white. In the beginning, I did, in my career, whatever you want to call it, my parcours, I did a lots of black and white. I always thought that to reduce what I was giving was better. We can hear better in silence, that Aristotle. So reducing the sense, very thing, image, not too full, not saying so much, because was the way I wanted to go, but also because everything is done with film in analog, and I print, and I know there's the impact of my hand that is really important. But the last few years I've discovered color, and I started to be quite in love with color and wanted to know more and understand more. When you photograph space, you don't make the color, so you have to make sure you find a palette of color around you that you like. I don't do Photoshop where you kind of put everything pale and desaturate so it looks okay, because often, photographing space, you have maybe a orange brick, green grass, and a blue sky, and it's really hard to put that together. So it needs a lot of patience to understand why you can do a color photograph, but I definitely enjoy. And I think it's one of the experience of a place. It's also the color. Maybe it's not the only one. We can think that maybe we see the first experience of space in our eye and our brain. It's black and white. If you think that is the rod around the eyes that see it before the cone, but it's fraction of seconds. So I don't know, because you see first in black and white and then in color, the periphery. But this is going a bit pushing. And so a lots of black and white, and then I always see color as one other experience, because I'm really trying to describe experience. Going back to those two photographs, we are with the tree again in the garden of Lieberman, and it's a tree where the path and the tree are blending. So it's something where the making, of course, it's a garden which is built, but when nature and built environment blend, and this is something I really enjoy also a lot. Maybe in this image is not yet the one where you feel, but you go through the path, in the middle of the path there's a tree. Mm-hmm. So it's not something where the tree are somehow helping to go through understandable path. You are also confronted with nature while you walk, and I thought that was also a very strong gesture. And then when I started to photograph Villa Kerilos in the south of France, because it's the Theodore Reichmann, I think, was the owner, and he decided that he wanted to build a house that has as a reference the Greek house, because for him it was the only really fair system that he wanted to promote. After the affaire Dreyfus, he was very disappointed, and he wanted to create a world which would be more equal, and he thought the Greek system. So his house, it's a completely copy of a Greek house. It's incredible. It's just like outside anything we can imagine. And in the photograph, I wanted to somehow, with the blur, with the column which are there, but there's also a grid, so there is a space in between. There's a sense of gate. There's the dream, with his vision about what the house could be. And then the verticality brought me to put it together. But it is, I think the image on the right could stay also by itself. I just say this is.
Yeah. No, I feel the same, that all of these are just singularly extraordinary. But they do invite this sort of way of thinking about them, that when they come together. And yeah, so I wanted to, because you mentioned about film, and it is also mentioned in the introductory thing about you're an advocate for the analog. And are you working with film, or do you work digitally? And then what is your relationship to the sort of?
Out of the phone, I've never done anything digitally, so only film. It's hard. It's getting more and more difficult to get the film, the good color processing, and the black and white. I do everything myself, but it's still possible. And I don't want to change. I think the limitation, the type of concentration that you have to, and you have one shot that you have to do it perfectly, because the film will not forgive you. And it's something very precious, and allows you to connect in a very beautiful way with the place, when you know that it's a statement. Now I'm doing it. And that having the sense, I turn around with the digital camera, I do many, and then it doesn't mean that some photographer doing wonderful work with digital photography, and it's been helping many people because it's not so expensive, because it's so direct, because you don't have to carry so much. But for the way I work, I think that's what I need.
Wonderful. That's great. Should we go on to another slide?
Yes.
So this is Strawberry Hill, isn't it? This is this was partly behind my question about what it is to live in a place, because there is a sense here of you picking out a relationship to the detail that must come over time. There's the on the left you've described or you've singled out the robin and the butterfly on what looks like a blackberry briar, and then on the right there is this are they strawberries in the window there?
Yes,
But
only 21 are the strawberries.
there's one sort of wild strawberry on the detail, but there is this sense that this comes from both the fact that there's a delight in detail, which comes from living in a place. I don't know whether all of this was made at the same time, or whether the decision to paint the wall or to add those details in the window panes are a work in progress. I was reading that Walpole, it probably took him about 50 years to build this house, and there's a sense of embellishment and a kind of richness that accretes over time, and you've kind of picked it up here with these two images, and one black and white and one color, which is kind of interesting as well. How would you talk about this?
You were also talking before, I imagine, part of the question, how long do I stay somewhere? And there's an equation between quality and time, which is absolute, especially not in that case, because it was soft light, but I work a lot with the sun and what the sun does to the space. So you really need to study and prepare where you're going to shoot. This project is a bit, you have to go to Strawberry Hill House, but it's still London, so I could work and then go back and wanted to explore more. And like the one on the left, when I heard that actually the wallpaper that we were seeing was not the one from Lady Redgrave, and she had her own, they open a little room which is close to the public and move some step and things to show me some originally what she liked to have around her, because this lady opened a salon, and it was the first salon where a woman was at the head of the salon, and she had politicians, she had writer, and she wanted to create that surrounding, and she called the house Strawberry Hill. And I kind of imagined why strawberry and why bird. It was maybe a desire to have her own representation of how do you say, a coat, arm coat, or coat. Normally you have a soldier with a spade or
a coat of arms or something.
A coat of arm, and her coat of arm was nature.
Yes.
That was what, and somehow with the bird, with the flower, it's not the sweeting things already are sweet. There was a more connection with nature that I thought she wants to bring, and that's why she did that. And then I started to look at details of what she must have liked, and why did she call the place like this, and made all the strawberry details that you see also in some other decoration, not only in this glass window. So that was a way to get close to her.
Reading about her in the book, I was really struck by, first of all, the criticism she received. Like they blamed her for mismanagement of the estate, when in fact she was the one that raised the money to restore it, and that and there was this sort of the language being used. There was this sense of sort of very clear anti-Semitism, and one realized that that there was this both very much involved in society, and as you say, creating a salon and really entering the public space and public conversation, public debate. At the same time, there was always this underlying sense of, she's fighting an uphill battle against a kind of English anti-Semitism, which was really horrible, like horrible to read about. But so this house sort of holds the personal life of these people in an amazing way. Yeah, should we go to another slide?
Yes, let's I think.
Right. Tell us about. I was really struck by the framing of both these works in very different ways. But would you introduce them and
I mean, the combination is new. It's for this talk that I thought, oh, let's put something together that is a bit displacing. So again, we are in Kerinos. So we have this ritual and this order and a bit of light in the back, and the idea of Greek society where probably the courtyard, the water was very important, and a lot of connection. And the other one is the painting again in the Franchetti Villa, which is wild and open and a dance. So it's more about confronting energy than anything else.
Yeah.
And the one in there's almost no color. It's at the end of the day. And the other one has the color of the painting, which is quite extravagant.
I was really struck how difficult it is to photograph this painting in this ceiling, because it itself is strongly framed. One has this sense of perspective, and this sort of you're being forced into an illusion. And it's quite interesting the way that you've sort of resisted it in terms of cutting across the perspective and showing, in a sense, revealing the space of the room, so that you still have the sense of it being a room, as well as it being this sort of tour de force of neo-Renaissance painting in a way. But
also the doubt: what is painting? What is the room? Somehow,
yes.
What is what's the threshold between the two? So
yes, because it starts on the walls and it goes into the ceiling, doesn't it? So, and it plays and blurs with that distinction in an amazing way. Yeah. Great. Another thing I wanted to ask you is scale of the scale you choose to print at, because when I saw these in the flesh, I was quite struck by how they remain quite intimate in scale. That they are sort of this size rather than large.
I think it depends on the project. In that case, I wanted to be something that, in that case, we see it in the library. So of Strawberry Hill Manor. So there's no sense to have a large image. You're in a library, you're used to the dimension of a book and to concentrate with something you can hold in your hand. And the exhibition is going to travel to different locations, and they are all home. They are not gallery. So Lieberman House, it's a home. So even if now they transform something into an exhibition space. And to Waterson, maybe in Waterson I would do one or two large, because you have to kind of dialogue with the building, which is loud. So it's more difficult. I print a lot, 50 by 60, 20-24 inch. So that is still a format which you can handle easily, where you have a body relation, which is not too far. And sometimes quite big, 1 meter by 1.80 meters, especially projects which have texture and detail, because there's something revealing, almost kind of opening up, that is a surprise that you didn't see before. There's a lot to say about how do you look, because I thought a lot that when you look at a small work, you go very close and you don't see the rest. You have to be isolated with this image, because you go close and then your eyes cannot go so far. And a larger painting, you step back and then you started to be surrounded more by space. But then a friend of mine told me something very beautiful. If you go have a big painting, you might go close and choose your own detail, which I thought that was also very nice. So uh, there is quite a lot of thinking about what you want to do when you decide the size of
Yeah.
painting.
Wonderful, yeah, this sense of you can describe the monumental in something really intimate and small in scale. And I think this is a wonderful example of that. There's a sort of a reverie and an ecstasy where you're invited into this incredible space, and yet you are looking at something that is really quite modest in scale. It's certainly not Gursky kind of panoramic. And great. Well, let's move on to another. So this is we've come to the end of the Jewish Country House project, and now we are looking at Chinese gardens. And yeah, would you tell me? I was so fascinated by this project, and yeah, there's a lot to say about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
could you?
It was a commission because I had an exhibition in Shanghai in one of the main contemporary museum, and I brought all my work there, and they said, "But can you do something Chinese?" And I said yes. I didn't wanted to go to a contemporary. Not that there isn't some wonderful contemporary architecture, very sensitive, maybe project we don't see. We imagine that Chinese is only big rises building with an quite unhuman way of living, but there are also some very tiny projects. But it was more not to create any competition. I thought, okay, let's go for history, even if sometimes they are rare because many places have been destroyed. And I heard about the Suzhou Garden from different sources that is not so far from Shanghai, that they were very beautiful garden, but with an interesting structure and with very interesting walls. And even some professor was saying, oh, the walls, they are like a theater of shadows. You will see, or they somehow, and I was trying, oh, maybe I will see all the different part of the garden being projected, and let's go there and photograph shadows on this white wall. First of all, after when I arrived there, I say, no, I come with my shadow because I grew up in Italy. It's always about shadows and stone, but this is a humid country where it's so humid that that's what you have to depict. The walls are not white, and they are full of life and growth. And somehow this growth reminded me very early Chinese painting, that I knew that this garden often have as an inspiration maybe a calligraphy or maybe an old poem or a painting, something quite ephemeral that belonged to the Chinese tradition, that is somehow the main inspiration for the garden. So to find again on the wall this ephemeral moment of Chinese culture was for me very beautiful because of the lichen, because of the growth, because of the humidity. And I said, this is what I want to photograph. I started black and white, and then I realized that it will decay its side without the color. You needed the blue and the green to feel that it was alive. And only recently, I read an article because there's an exhibition at the CCA in Montreal about the gardens, that actually the wall were painted with a kind of lime paint with rice and fish stocks to help the growth of this. And it was a desire to not let them completely white. There's been some even misinterpretation because early studies of the garden in the 20s were mostly done in black and white photograph, and they've been known as white wall of the Suzhou Garden, but they're not white. So they was not allowed to make color wall because if you're not an emperor, you could not have a house with a red wall, but they did a white, but they let the kind of the color coming. And I was so glad that I had this intuition because I didn't know that it was part of the idea of the garden, that it should somehow also have, again, this fusion between the built environment and the nature. And the idea was to say, if the body cannot move anymore because it's a wall, it's an edge, and they're quite strong. And there's also maybe reason that the people that live there maybe were not allowed to travel too much, and the kind of complex history is when the moment the body doesn't move, the imagination does. So you see all the landscape and the places that you cannot see physically with your imagination looking at the wall. So it's been a great, a great pleasure to do this. And in that case, the prints are quite big. They're about 1 meter by 80. Yeah.
I was reading about how they are. They've been developed over like hundreds of years. The tradition of this kind of garden started in the 12th century and went on until
even some early. I think they are dynasties, so for us it's a little bit more difficult. And also the notion of time, it's not that we can say, oh, it's a Renaissance or it's a Baroque or it's something. It's over a period, and something stay and something evolve or something is redone. Notion of history is completely different.
It's
quite fascinating.
And what you were saying about the relationship to sort of Confucian scholar painting, this ink painting where images emerge from the ink, and there's a sense of the same happening on these walls, as you say, that there's a sort of things sort of emerge and recede. And it was this idea of this is a landscape of the mind as well, because you would come here to contemplate and meditate, and there would be this relationship to knowledge and wisdom, which is contained within painting, within the scholar painting and within this notion of landscape and this rather beautiful way that one's working within restriction. Again, because you get this sense of an incredible landscape through your photographs, but they are relatively enclosed spaces, aren't they? As far as I know, they're sort of, they're not large gardens. They're very small and
the garden are not huge. They're very busy garden. They have hundreds of bonsai, little bridge, and think it's not the Japanese garden. It's very different.
Yeah.
And the wall are kind of almost peeling off the architecture, and sometimes they are double, or they create a little place like a well for the light to come, or little protection for the rain. It's not something that has a very clear geometrical configuration. As you see, it's a square, it's a rectangle. They're quite organic and not particularly high, and not a very strong presence. You have to go there to start to look at them. It's quite subtle, let's say, the presence of the wall. So yes, you have to go and be confronted with those moments.
Wonderful. I've just looked at the time, and we've gone over, and we haven't got to the end of your images, which that just shows how rich these are. And maybe we can continue talking as the question and answers happen, so that I can read some out to you if that's good. First question: what is the relation between your photography and the notion of memory, not only in relation to the Jewish Country Houses project, but broadly speaking? So your photography and memory.
I mean, photography and memory have always been extremely linked, not only because we want to create a memory. We make a photo of a child that is born because we want to remember that moment, it's extremely linked. But the beautiful things that I try to convey And Bachelard said in a Poetic of Space that memory is its anchor in space and not in time. We remember. If I think about the first time, I don't know, I had an ice cream, I remember the little cafe. I don't remember the period. You remember the place. And he's so beautiful the way he said his anchor. So it is a little boat that wants to go, but it's holding, because of space, can hold so well memory. And often, let's say I photograph a staircase. I love the idea of making a photograph that has enough openness or freedom or ambiguity that when you see the staircase, you remember hundreds of other staircases you've seen in your life, because it's not only about imposing that view that I give, it's about opening up your view that you have. And that's when I think that the notion of memory, it's really enriching the photograph very much.
Wonderful. I should also just, I forgot to mention, I should have said this at the very beginning, but this talk is recorded. So everyone will have a chance to re-watch, or if one's missed any part of it, you'll be able to go back to it. Another question: how does the extent of your length and depth of pre-knowledge shape your thinking and creative outcome?
I'm not a scholar, but I like to think and read and look what I'm doing, and understanding the architect of the period, or the philosophy behind something. I try to prepare as much as possible, but I allow myself to be surprised. And that's very important. It's not that I have a plan where I'm only going to do this and this and that is made and written before. If when I'm there, all what I know and feel got me somewhere else, I think then I'm in front of a beautiful place, and that is strong, and it's also telling me something I wasn't planning. So yes, it's important to implement, and also sometime after, like I read this article about the garden and the paint. It comes after, and it reinforced some of my feeling. But at the time, maybe I didn't spend enough time looking for some more writing. But to feel you're not alone, it's very nice. And sometimes an architect, if it's a contemporary, been working 5, 6, 7 years on the project, so you are there maybe twice 1 week, and it's important to share some of his thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Another question. Hello, thank you both. In case this doesn't come up in the conversation, could you please say a bit about the photographic process of documenting those countryside houses? Was it over a period of time of returning? Were they taken in a certain time of day or year? Which camera did you use? Anything you are happy to share about the process will be great.
Of course, in that case, it was important I knew a bit about the history, because that's so specific. So I cannot just go there and be intuitive about the story of the family. And there's been already, some of the texts were ready for the book, and I could read them. Time of the year, it was done also kind of during pandemic, in between, and as soon as I could fly and go somewhere, it was very nice. Tugendhat, I really wanted not to go when it was overgrown. I didn't want too much sun and light, because the windows are very strong and line of light coming in. So a foggy day, I wanted autumn or spring. It was a decision in that case. Like the Franchetti Villa, it didn't matter. The interior, then you are Italy, and it's one day cloudy, one day sunny. It didn't make a huge difference. Then I have Naiman, which is a garden, which we didn't see today. And I really wanted to go when the magnolia were in flower, and it was absolutely incredible. So I was lucky, because the project took a few years to plan and to go when I thought that was the best moment for the house. I use my 4x5 camera, which is an Aka Swiss with plate, and that's my
with the big negatives, the 4x5.
negative. Yeah, and each, you have a little film holder. You put 2 negative, and I always do 2 shots of 1 image. So it's quite a lot of preparation and weight. And sometimes I use Hasselblad, but in this specific project, I haven't used it a lot. There's only 1 image in exhibition where I use the Hasselblad, which is a little bit more free. I have more fun with the Hasselblad.
Wonderful. Another question: do you include the Philip Sassoon country houses in your book?
No.
No.
It's not in the book. No.
Yeah.
I was not part of the selection of the project. That was the work of Juliette and Abigail, and we discussed it together which one will be visually the most interesting. So.
Yeah. And then we have I'd be very curious to hear Helene's processes or experience in a given space before she even picks up the camera. So,
I think to wait, not to pick up the camera too quickly, it's rather important, because if you don't have a body relationship with the place and the camera, it's an obstacle. Yeah, it's on the tripod. It's something. So I try to stay quite a bit, and especially to study the light and to look at every space, thinking when the sun is going to come, is he going to come, and making a little plan with my assistant. Let's be there at 3 and at 4, and then you realize you have to be at 4 o'clock in 2 different spaces. And again, a planning, but to be allowed to be surprised that something you didn't plan, and that's a very nice moment. So.
Wonderful. These are all great questions. So another question: these images are beautiful. Does the beauty of the image distract from the theme of Jewish house? Could you create the same effect anywhere? For example, a birch tree is a birch tree, whether it's in a Jewish garden or a Russian forest.
Are there 2 questions in one question?
I think there is. So let's start with: does beauty of the image distract from the theme of the Jewish house?
I mean, the beauty is not something you pursue as a thing. You say, I want to say beauty. I want to make a beautiful photograph. The beauty comes when you have the right ingredient together that suddenly balance properly, create something, touch you. So it's something that comes. And if the ingredient I had are interesting ingredient, you are touched by the image. That's what I want to do. I don't think they distract you from the subject. It's not a book that is a dark book. It's a book about dream, about wishes, about the wanted to be, and there's a lot of positive energy in the making of the house, all of them. This is what I want to portray. It's a sense of wanted to belong, integrate, and love the culture. You come to the England, you want to make a garden because you want to be British and you love the culture. It is something very, very beautiful. What happened after, later, that's the second part. That's it.
There's the second part of this question, and also the following question sort of are related. So I'm going to read them together. So could you create the same effect anywhere? For example, a birch tree is a birch tree, whether it's in a Jewish garden or a Russian forest. And then the next question from someone else is: what is Jewish about these images?
I think what is Jewish, it's the history of being somewhere and not be allowed for a long time to own land and to build, and suddenly you could. and the gesture is so unique because you had to embrace another culture to feel your belonging. And that's the history. My images are not following a Jewish aesthetic. They are just following a dream and a wish, and that's what matters. Of course, the birth tree can be in Russia. The context of the reading of the image, it's certainly going to influence your observation. When you go to nature, it belongs to all of us, without this stupid border, without all of that. So there's no way a birch grow in a different way in a different land. Olive trees are olive tree, whatever land they are in, and this is just our culture and our surrounding, and they are a little bit more wise than us.
Yeah. But what you're saying about context is so obviously important, that you know that there's the stage, the actual entry into this house itself is a study of a Jewish house, and in that sense, one always has to think about both the image in terms of the aesthetics, but also the context is so important. And yeah,
we can never read an image without like the mind of a child. We always read an image with so many other image and knowledge, and so it's always a reference.
Yeah. Okay, we're almost out of time. How do you approach the building when you photograph it? Does your research beforehand determine what aspects you photograph, or do you wait until you are at the site to see what stands out?
But maybe this was already answered somehow
so.
With the question, and this relationship between the surprise and the knowledge, that should be a nice balance between the two. Yeah.
Wonderful. I think, to be honest, there are great questions, and they continue. But we've had. I was told about the time that we should keep it to an hour. So I think probably we should end now. But I just want to thank you, Hélène, for a really insightful and beautiful talk, and the way that you talk about your works. And I really recommend everyone goes to the exhibition in Strawberry Hill House and sees the images and sees the house. And wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Ian. It was great.
Bye.